So a mouse and a man are walking down a narrow corridor and toward each other, and the mouse says to the man, look, I know I really should be running the other way now, but there's a cat back there, and I've got to go this way, so I hope you don't mind if I just scoot past you. And the man looks down and says, hello there, mouse. I wonder why you're not scared of me. The mouse looks up and says, fine, okay, you don't have to talk to me. I'm just a mouse, you know, it's whatever. But I'm just going to tell you, I'm just going to scoot past you. I hope you're not the kind of guy who squishes mice and stuff. So he scoots past him, and the man keeps walking and says to himself, well, I wonder what a mouse would say if a mouse could talk. The point of this is that this pitch, a mouse cannot hear that pitch. The man has any kind of a low voice. Literally, the mouse cannot hear him talk. And of course, little mousy troubadours are out there right now, and they're singing things like, feeling frisky and healthy over here, pretty attractive, eligible bachelor. And we can't hear them because it's beyond our range, and typically, you know, human-centered world thing, we call it a whole different name if it's a sound that we can't hear. But this idea of understanding how the receiver receives information, if you're going to try to communicate, is essential to the work that I did. And the details, if you will, of how we communicate in that kind of frequency range are important. There's a guy named Eugene Morton who worked right here in Washington, Smithsonian, now lives up in Pennsylvania. He discovered that high, pure sounds like, oh, you're so cute, oh, they tend to be affectionate. And low, harsh, loud, I'm gonna get you, are threats. And this is true across species, that this is more than primal. It goes back hundreds of millions of years. Even reptiles and birds share this polarity. But, of course, what's high for us is low to a cotton-top tamarin monkey, and what's high to a tamarin monkey is low to a bat. So you have to get it right for the species if you're trying to communicate something to that species. This is a quote that I think is all too true. The world, we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. We tend to look at the world from our own eyes and assume everybody else is doing pretty much the same thing. So music has been called the universal language, but I think it can be made even more universal, even extending to other species if we understand how it works. And so basically the beginning of what I did was I took music apart. I was trying to examine how music affects the emotions. And so I separated it into as many indivisible components as I could, and there turned out to be about 26 of them. And I asked the question of each one, why would that be familiar to us? Why would that affect our emotions? Example is pulse. Pulse in music, it's consistent, it's very simple. Why? What is it about pulse? It has nothing to do with language. And so after a few years of examination and study, I came up with what I thought were plausible answers for these questions and for each of the elements. And I figured that I had a workable theory after that. So one thing that seemed clear, that should have been clear when even before I started, it became clear when I was working on it, that human music is human, that it's developed by humans for humans, based on our perceptions and our development. And that underneath this, there were two categories where most of these features of music are based on. One is our vocalizations and our languages, and the other is on brain development, specifically what the sonic environment was like when the emotional structures of our brains were being built. The limbic system has been called, the emotional structure of the brain. What happened while they were developing? This has turned out, I believe, to be the central feature of music. So what I decided to do is, any good theory is testable. So if I was right about this, I should be able to write music for another species. Take our parameters, vocalizations, and then adjust them to fit the vocalizations of the other species, and take the parts of music that are built, designed for human listening based on the sounds of the womb, and adjust them to fit the sounds of the fetal environment of the other species. So with this theory, I decided I would start at the top. I didn't want to start with a lowly person who was maybe just doing a little something. I thought, well, I'll start from the guy who's like famous, and if he turns me down, then I'll kind of work down. So I went with Charles Snowden. I sent it to him. He was an eminent, even famous primatologist and psychologist. He had a colony of cotton-top tamarin monkeys, and it was a nice group to study because they're a highly vocal species, and there had just been a study published from Harvard of the effect of music on these monkeys. And like all other controlled studies, basically, animals don't give a damn about our music. And they really have no reason to. And they had, this test, they showed a slight preference for Mozart over German techno music. I think that's completely understandable. But they preferred silence to either one. And so he was interested in my study. This is, by the way, there's a cotton-top tamarin monkey. Very cute squirrel-sized creature, like this. And so what I did was transcribe their calls into musical notation. I slowed them down like 8 times, 3 octaves down, and then listened to them and took down like musical dictation. I wanted to be able to write out their calls in musical terms. And then I studied them based on their contexts and all. And each of these calls in the kind of library lexicon of what they do has very charming names, like the chevron chatter is what they give when they find some food. The ascending multi-whistle is a mother-to-infant call. So then he sent me 2 new calls. One was the SL trill. And this is, you'll hear the SL trill, you'll hear the call of the monkey, and then you'll hear what it sounds like if we slow it down into our perceptive range. So this is 8 times slower. Maybe this is. That is an E-flat major scale, starting on G. I had to sit down when I listened to that because, of course, we thought we invented E-flat major. And this is the SL multi. And here it is slowed down 8 times. It sounds like a horror show. And so the trill, regular rhythms, tonal, normal tone of voice, and consonant intervals. The multi, irregular rhythms, harsh tone, and dissonant. If you examine the intervals, you use dissonant intervals. So I sent back a letter. I was a little reluctant because, you know, the guy's famous, and he hadn't agreed to spend any money on this, you know, wasn't inclined to spend any of his grant money on playing music for his animals. But I said, yeah, I don't think these belong in the same category. I didn't know at the time that SL, I think it was just the initials of the guy who discovered the calls. But I thought they were in the same category, and I said, I don't think they belong in the same category because one sounds like an in-group vocalization and the other sounds like a threat. As it turns out, then I was right, and he liked the idea that based on a musical analysis, I was basically able to tell him what these guys were talking about. So we did the study, and so we played music for the tamarin monkeys. So this is from a New York Times article on the thing, and it was a success. So it was the first music that showed a response from any other animal. And we had human controls, and as usual, who cares? And then we had tamarind music. We had two different kinds. Music that was intended to get them all riled up, and it got them all riled up. And music intended to calm them down, and it calmed them down. There was one, what you would think would be an exception, something of an anomaly, and that was this song, which was our human control for agitating music by the heavy metal band Tool. They were significantly calmed by this music. So why would that be? This is the one, like, interspecies connection. Oh, hey, that's very calming. So the answer, as it turns out, comes in what is the center point. When examined all these different aspects of music, there was really only one explanation for most of the features in music, and all of the features of music that are found in the music of all cultures. And that is what we heard in the womb. Now, it sounds a bit far-fetched because, of course, we don't have conscious access to those memories. But here are the features that make this possible, that you could hear for almost 4 months before you were born. And those sounds are absolutely constant. Night, day, this just relentless. This is key. It's loud down there. The heartbeat is, well, they managed to talk these, I'll go into that. There was a study done of people who the water had broken and they had to be on their back, and they managed to convince them to have microphones put up right next to the fetus ear. And so sure enough, it's loud down there. And the heartbeat and the respiration are loud. The mother's voice is so loud, the fetus, that it just totally drowns out the heartbeat. 75 decibels is about a bus that passes right next to you. And so this is where we get to the key, is that it's a principle of neurological development, that information that is incoming as a brain structure is being formed will tend to remain. In other words, it's like baking a spice into a cake. And the brain structures responsible for our emotions in that limbic system are almost completely formed at birth. Basically, there's a lot of other growing to do after you're born in the upper cortical areas, but the deep brain, the midbrain, you're completely cooked when you're born. And all that growing happens while you're listening to these constant sounds. So, Mother Nature's worked it out so that we can't consciously access that information, as you know. But that's why it's remained a mystery for so long. But we do remember those sounds. And when we hear it, there is a familiarity to it, an ultimate kind of familiarity. And so, as a kind of a test of this part of the theory, it should be then, if we look at music, we should find, since everybody comes out of a womb, we should find these features of music that are born literally in the womb. We should find them in the music of all cultures. There are a lot of differences, as you know, between the musics of different cultures. They should be consistent. And also, we should be able to work from the other end. We should be able to look at music and find the sounds that are present in the womb represented in music. And sure enough, all of the features that are present in the sonic environment are found in the music of all cultures. One of them is consistency. The relationship between language and music, of course, is very strong, but it doesn't exist. It is not continuous. But with the exceptions to any one of these is less than 1% of the music of any culture, that it always is continuous, it always has a pulse, it always has a meter, which is a combination of strong and weak beats that is a result of the combination of respiration and heartbeat. And there are discrete pitches, there are notes involved. No music of any culture sounds like, oh. There are pitches. And those notes are the result of, when you listen in the womb, you can't really hear the consonants very well. They're up here in speech, high frequencies. So if I were to say, what are you doing today? Down there it sounds like, they're just these notes. And all music in all cultures has those. And if you look at the melodic instruments of cultures, they all play in this treble clef rate. If I look at this, if this was the treble clef, oh, I love Blackwood. We can hear, hear, hear. And this actually is like a most sensitive range, high piccolo, because we be able to pick up sounds like SH. We have most sensitive hearing. But here is where the music, all cultures, melodic instruments, lies in that treble clef, the oboe, violin, for us. And of course, that's the female, adult female voice. That's strange. And so the question is answered of why they were called by Tool is because same as what's high to us is low to them, what's fast to us, speed metal, is their lullaby. And the pulse of the grudge is about the same as the resting heart rate of the adult female tamarin monkey. So the idea of all this that I think is exciting is that we can begin to have genuine contact with and even communication with and understand the communication of other species. And it allows us to move away from the idea that we can just see the world from our own narrow perspective. But if we can hear the world from the perspective of some other species and see through their eyes, it will give us a better perspective on how the world really is. Get away from the idea that I think only humans could ask, since that if a mouse falls in the woods and there's no human there to hear it, would it really make a sound? Answer, of course, is yes, but only if you're listening like a mouse. Thank you very much.